Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you found your way here. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and don't forget to share. I'd love to know your location in the comments. Let's get going. Raymond often found himself amazed at how his life with Melanie had blossomed into something he once only dreamed of. He truly believed he had discovered in her a partner grounded in mutual respect and unwavering trust. Melanie, with her dazzling smile and fiercely self-reliant spirit, cherished her independence, a trait Raymond not only acknowledged, but deeply appreciated. He never wanted to be the clingy or controlling kind of boyfriend. Maybe that's why he felt a swell of admiration when she brought up her plans for a girls' trip to Miami. "You've earned it, love. It'll be great for you," he had told her with heartfelt support. The beginning of the trip seemed smooth and carefree. She kept in touch frequently, sending cheerful messages, snapshots of sunlit beaches, and playful selfies with her friends. One evening, she even shared a video of a charming seaside restaurant where they had dinner. Even with the distance between them, Raymond felt a sense of closeness, confident that their connection remained solid and true. But on the last night of the trip, something began to shift. Her unexpected silence was the first thing that unsettled him, though he resisted the urge to overthink. He recalled his mother's wise words from when he was young. "Don't chase thunderclouds when the sky's still blue." Still, a quiet anxiety started to take root. Melanie had always responded quickly, even when busy. That night, though, her message was brief and oddly distant. "Ate too much. Super tired. Turning in early." Raymond didn't press. He accepted it for what it was. But the message looped in his mind. It felt rushed, like she was trying to end the conversation as fast as possible. When she returned the next day, her energy was bright and vibrant. She breezed into their home radiating joy, her laughter filling the room as she wrapped him in a warm embrace. With enthusiasm, she shared stories of shopping adventures, time spent with her friends, and the refreshing change from everyday life. Raymond tried to silence the uneasy thoughts still echoing inside him. She looks happy. The trip must have done her good, he told himself as he watched her unpack. But despite the warmth of their reunion, something subtle felt misaligned. Tiny inconsistencies began to trouble him, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Perhaps it was how her eyes darted away when he casually asked how she'd spent that final night. Or the way she quickly brushed off the question, saying she'd lost track of time and pivoted to another topic. Whatever it was, a gnawing unease started to settle in his chest. Determined to stay calm and be the steady, supportive partner he'd always aimed to be, Raymond kept his worries to himself. Yet, over the next few days, the sense of discomfort refused to fade. He began to question whether the faith he had so confidently placed in their relationship was truly based on trust, or just hopeful illusion. And then, out of nowhere, something happened that gave shape to the suspicions he had tried to suppress. While lounging on the couch, an email notification popped up on Melanie's laptop, sending a strange shiver through him, as though fate had nudged him forward. Her computer lay open on the coffee table, and his eyes drifted toward the screen. He wasn't the type to invade her privacy. They had always honored that boundary. But the soft ping of the alert pulled his attention. Before he could redirect his gaze, his eyes caught the subject line. "Thank you for your visit. Ocean Breeze Restaurant." The name didn't ring a bell, and something about it struck him as odd. Melanie had never mentioned it. He hesitated. Then curiosity overtook hesitation. He clicked the touchpad, and the email opened. The message read, "We appreciate you dining with us at Ocean Breeze. It was a pleasure to serve you. Please find a photo from your visit attached. We look forward to seeing you again." It was the kind of message you'd expect from a tourist-friendly venue. But then he saw her name listed as the reservation holder. He opened the attached image, expecting perhaps another group shot with her friends. But what appeared stunned him, like a physical blow. Melanie was seated at an intimate, softly lit table, wearing a sleek black dress he didn't recognize. and she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man, smiling warmly, his hand seemingly reaching across the table for hers. What hurt the most was Melanie's face. She looked serene, radiant, genuinely happy in a way that had become unfamiliar to him. Raymond stared at the photo, frozen, his mind spiraling to make sense of what he saw. Maybe he's just a friend of one of her girlfriends, he tried to reason, desperate to hold panic at bay. But the romantic setting, the unspoken connection between them, and the fact that she had never once mentioned this dinner, not even in passing, were too loud to ignore. Raymond shut the laptop abruptly, as if closing it could somehow make the image disappear. But it was too late. The image was seared into his memory. His pulse pounded, and a tightness gripped his throat. He thought about confronting her right then. But what would he even say? He didn't know if she'd be honest with him. One thing he did know: he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen it. That single photo had unearthed more doubts than he'd ever imagined. A whirlwind of questions crashed through his thoughts. Why had she hidden that evening? Who was that man? And why did she look so effortlessly content in his presence? As he sat motionless on the couch, Raymond began to recognize patterns he had previously ignored. Since coming back from Miami, Melanie had been more protective of her phone, reserved in a way that suggested she was guarding a truth just out of reach. Raymond couldn't determine whether his instincts were sounding an alarm, or if he was finally confronting a truth he'd always chosen to ignore. Either way, in that moment, he made a decision. If there was something lurking beneath the surface of his relationship, he was going to dig until he uncovered it. The first sting of what felt like betrayal was still forming, but it came hand in hand with a sharp clarity and determination. He knew that to face this properly, he had to remain composed. The image he'd seen had unlocked something, and now that the door was open, he was ready to walk through it, no matter the consequences. In the days that followed, Raymond moved through his routine like an outsider in his own life. The image from the email haunted him, replaying in his thoughts with relentless persistence. Every fiber of him wanted to confront Melanie, to demand an explanation, to tear the truth from her. But he also knew that acting without proof would only invite more deceit, more carefully woven lies. He couldn't afford that. Not now. He needed evidence. He needed certainty. The question of how to obtain it occupied his mind constantly, even as he forced himself to pretend everything was normal. Little by little, Melanie's behavior began to shift in his eyes. Every gesture, every word, seemed to carry hidden meaning. She had grown more withdrawn, her laughter more restrained, especially during their usual morning conversations. Her phone, once casually placed wherever she went, now never left her side, always locked, always close. But what hurt most was her happiness, a kind of vibrant, untouchable joy that seemed to bloom in places where Raymond no longer had access. It was as if she had divided her world in two and only allowed him to exist in part of it. Then, one afternoon, the moment Raymond had been waiting for presented itself. Melanie, in a rush to meet a friend, left her phone plugged into the charger on the kitchen counter. He stood motionless, caught in a silent battle. His conscience urged him to walk away. What if he was wrong? What if he destroyed something still salvageable? But the memory of the unfamiliar man in the photograph flared in his mind again, tightening the knot in his stomach. With shaking hands, he reached for the phone. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he unlocked it and navigated quickly to her apps. When he opened her messaging app, a conversation caught his eye. Someone named Leonard, a name he'd never heard her mention before. He opened the thread, and in seconds, his worst fears became reality. There was no ambiguity. The messages were unmistakable. Dinner in Miami was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. Holding you before I left meant everything. I miss you already. Then Melanie's reply, written just the night before. I feel the same. Every moment with you was magical. I hope we can be together again soon. Raymond stared, rereading the lines, each one cutting deeper than the last. There was no room for doubt. This was not a harmless friendship. Further down the thread were photographs, candid, intimate, affectionate. Smiles meant for someone else. Messages filled with tenderness, suggestions of future plans, and whispered commitments. But what finally broke him came from Leonard, just before Melanie returned home. "I hope you're ready to tell him. You deserve to be happy." The phone slipped from Raymond's grasp, his breath catching as the full weight of what he'd discovered landed on him. This wasn't just infidelity. It was deliberate, premeditated betrayal. She had come back from her trip, kissed him, laughed beside him, all while sheltering a secret life. The pain was staggering. He felt the urge to explode, to demand answers, to end it right then. But something else stirred inside him. If Melanie believed she could control the narrative, she was wrong. He wasn't going to crumble, not like this. Raymond realized he had to transform his grief into strategy. He didn't just want answers anymore. He wanted consequences. As the storm in his chest began to settle into focus, a plan started to take shape. If Melanie had chosen deception, then he would meet it with revelation. Not through chaos, but with precision. He made a vow to himself. No reckless decisions. Every move would be measured. Every step would be calculated. Melanie had made her choices, and now she would have to face the fallout. Over the next several days, Raymond built a framework for what came next. Known by friends and colleagues as level-headed and meticulous, he now leaned into that reputation harder than ever. Melanie carried on, oblivious to what he knew. She smiled, laughed, carried conversations like nothing had changed. Her ignorance was his advantage. If she could orchestrate a lie so seamlessly, he could just as easily engineer its unraveling. The idea came to him one night, long after midnight, as he stared blankly at the ceiling. Her birthday was approaching. She'd been talking about it for weeks. "I want this year to be special," she had said, her face lit with excitement. "Something unforgettable." Raymond had smiled at her then, his mind already working. Unforgettable? Yes, it will be. The days that followed were filled with careful preparation. He rented an elegant venue, enlisted a top-tier decor team, and tailored every element to match her preferences. The flowers, the lighting, the playlist, everything was curated to perfection. No one suspected a thing. He invited everyone important in her life, her conservative, high-expectation parents, friends, co-workers, even distant relatives. The guest list was assembled with one goal: impact. To complete the illusion, he announced he had prepared a video tribute for Melanie, a loving montage to celebrate her life and their time together. A romantic gesture, he told them. A surprise from the heart. But the reality was far more devastating. Every evening, Raymond worked on the video. It began like any tribute might: laughter, shared vacations, happy milestones. But midway through, the tone shifted. The screen began to show the text messages, the pictures, the damning evidence. The first photo, the one that had sparked it all, anchored the reveal. Message after message, proof layered upon proof, woven together with chilling clarity. When the day of the celebration finally arrived, the venue was immaculate. Every last detail was flawless. Everything was ready. Melanie radiated pure joy, greeting each guest with heartfelt hugs and genuine laughter, her gratitude for Raymond's efforts evident in every gesture. Across the room, Raymond wore a calm, courteous smile as he welcomed attendees, though inside he was battling a storm of emotion, quietly waiting for the perfect time to act. The moments dragged endlessly as he lingered in place, letting the soft melodies and the gentle clink of champagne glasses fill the space, concealing the tension that brewed beneath the surface. And then, it was time. He ascended a small riser placed in the heart of the venue, microphone steady in hand. With measured calm, he addressed the crowd, thanking them for being part of the special evening. "Tonight is a celebration of Melanie," he began, his voice steady but distant. "She's a remarkable person, cherished not just by me, but by so many of you. I wanted to create something that shows how deeply she is loved." He gestured toward the screen. "So I made a video, a collection of memories that mean the world to me." As the lights dimmed and the screen lit up, he stepped aside. The opening scenes were touching, clips from their wedding day full of laughter, pictures from sunlit vacations, and moments shared with friends and family. The audience smiled, some murmuring fondly as familiar faces appeared on screen. Melanie's eyes shimmered with emotion, her expression softening with each frame. But then, the mood shifted. The music halted abruptly. A cold, sterile notification tone rang out from the speakers. On the screen, a message appeared in jarring clarity. "I loved our dinner in Miami. Can't stop thinking about you." An audible gasp rippled through the guests as an image followed. Melanie and Leonard, seated close in the low light of an upscale restaurant. The image was sharp, indisputable. Discomfort spread across the room like a wave, guests whispering nervously, glancing at each other in confusion and disbelief. Frozen in place, Melanie stared at the screen as the color drained from her face. More content followed, screenshots of messages exchanged between her and Leonard, affectionate, unmistakably intimate. The atmosphere grew heavier with every passing second. Her father suddenly stood, face flushed with fury, while her mother remained seated in stunned silence, a trembling hand pressed to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "How could you do this?" her father murmured, his voice low and broken. Melanie stood up abruptly, her hands trembling at her sides, struggling to form words that refused to come. Raymond, still on the platform, said nothing. He simply allowed the images and the silence to speak in his place. When the final frame faded, Raymond descended the platform in silence, moving past Melanie as though she were invisible. Her voice cracked as she reached out, desperate. "Raymond, please, let me explain. That's not what it looks like. Can we talk?" But he didn't turn back. Instead, he crossed the room to where his close friends stood, waiting. In his mind, the truth had been laid bare. No more words were needed. What began as a celebration had turned into a reckoning. Shortly afterward, Raymond left the venue, slipping into the night and leaving Melanie alone to bear the weight of what had been exposed. The laughter and music that once filled the room had been replaced with an oppressive stillness. Every gaze was locked on Melanie, who stood motionless, as though the ground beneath her feet had crumbled. Her mother, Martha, sat nearby, her face hollow with grief, clinging to a crumpled handkerchief. Her father, Robert, stood stiffly, his glare cutting through her like a blade. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice slicing through the silence. Melanie's lips parted, but all she could manage was a stammer. "Dad, it's not that simple." But he silenced her with a raised hand, his disappointment more devastating than any accusation. Guests began slipping out quietly, some glancing back with pity, others avoiding her entirely. Those who once admired her now recoiled in discomfort, whispering as they left. The image Melanie had so carefully maintained, polished, admired, respected, crumbled in moments. And there was nothing she could do to stop the unraveling. When the last guest had gone and only the staff remained to clear decorations, Melanie finally sank into a chair, her composure collapsing as the tears spilled freely. Her weeping wasn't just from humiliation. It was the crushing awareness that she hadn't just broken a promise. She had demolished a relationship, shattered trust, and damaged the foundation of what she and Raymond had built. That night, in the house they once called home, Melanie sat curled on the sofa, staring at the empty spaces that now felt foreign. The warmth the home once held had vanished, replaced with a hollow stillness. She knew Raymond wouldn't be back. Not that night, and possibly not ever. Then her phone buzzed. A flicker of hope passed through her. But it wasn't him. It was her mother. "Melanie," Martha's voice cracked with sorrow. "I don't even know what to say. We raised you better than this. How did we get here?" "I made a mistake," Melanie choked out. "I was overwhelmed, disconnected. I didn't mean to—" Her mother cut in, her tone firm despite the grief. "No, Melanie. You didn't get lost. You made choices. Choices that broke Raymond's heart. That went against everything we stand for. You caused this. And now, you have to live with what you've done." Her mother's words landed like heavy stones. For the first time, Melanie began to comprehend the full depth of what she had destroyed. Not just her marriage, but the trust of her parents, the respect of her friends, and the life she once took pride in. She tried calling Raymond. He didn't pick up. She sent a message. No reply. The silence was unbearable. Meanwhile, in a quiet hotel room nearby, Raymond sat alone. His emotions were tangled, grief mixed with the faintest sense of release. He knew what he had done was harsh, even unforgiving, but he also knew Melanie needed to understand the consequences of her betrayal. For the first time in weeks, he found sleep. The ache was still there, deep and undeniable, but the burden of silence was gone. He had lost someone he once loved beyond words, but he knew he couldn't let that loss define who he would become. The next morning, Melanie awoke to a home drained of warmth. Each room seemed to mourn, echoing faint traces of happier times, shadows of everything that had slipped beyond her grasp. Staring out the window, reality settled in. If she hoped to find any semblance of peace, she would first need to forgive herself. Yet deep inside, she recognized that offering herself grace would be the hardest part of all. Time crept forward, with days melting into weeks, and the hollow left by Raymond's absence widened like a wound. The house, once filled with vibrant noise and movement, now pulsed with silence so dense it felt unbearable. Every hallway, every corner, carried the weight of old laughter, of shared routines and quiet intimacy. She tried again and again to reach him. Messages left unanswered, emails ignored, even handwritten notes unopened. The man who had once been her refuge now felt unreachable, a familiar face sealed behind an invisible barrier. Meanwhile, Raymond was beginning to mend, one tentative breath at a time. He had found a modest place downtown, far from the spaces they had once called home. The simplicity of his new surroundings offered a kind of peace he hadn't expected. Without the ghosts of the past clinging to every surface, he could finally exhale. His days passed quietly. His nights were filled with books, music, and a stillness that no longer felt like punishment. For the first time in ages, he wasn't just getting by, he was truly existing. Then, during an aimless walk through a nearby park, something shifted. A casual encounter brought Abigail into his life, soft-spoken, with eyes that held calm and kindness. She had a golden retriever named Max, and he was holding a coffee when they nearly bumped into each other. It was the kind of meeting that seemed lifted from a movie, simple and unexpected. Abigail didn't interrogate or search for pieces of his past. Instead, she offered easy presence, a gentle companionship that Raymond hadn't realized he'd been yearning for. Back in her own orbit, Melanie was beginning to feel the full consequences of her choices. Where her job had once given her confidence, it now felt like a daily trial. The looks from co-workers had changed, some laced with thinly veiled judgment, others simply curious. But what hurt most was the slow, quiet unraveling of her relationship with her family. Calls became infrequent, and when they did come, they were stiff and shallow. The warmth she'd once felt with her mother had faded. Now, when their eyes met, sorrow hung heavy between them. The breaking point came one Sunday evening, during a visit to her parents' home that felt more like penance than reunion. Over a strained dinner, her father, usually reserved on such matters, finally spoke. His voice was low, but its edge was unmistakable. "You knew this could destroy everything, didn't you?" he asked. "That it wasn't just Raymond you stood to lose." His words struck with brutal clarity. Melanie's throat tightened. "I thought I could fix things," she whispered. "I didn't think it would end this way." Robert looked at her, tired and solemn. Then what are you going to do with what's left? The question lingered in the air, pressing into her like a burden she'd have to carry alone. It wasn't an accusation. It was a call to action. As Melanie began to gather the pieces of herself, Raymond continued to move forward. His connection with Abigail unfolded slowly, without pressure or urgency. Though his heart still bore scars, Abigail never asked him to rush past the pain. Her compassion was unwavering, her presence a steady reassurance. In time, Raymond found himself imagining a future again. Love, fragile, uncertain, began to feel within reach. Months passed, and one day, Raymond found an envelope in his mailbox with handwriting he hadn't seen in a long time. It was from Melanie. The letter inside didn't ask for anything, not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Instead, it spoke plainly, vulnerably. She acknowledged the hurt she had caused, admitted the depth of the damage. "What I broke can't be undone," she wrote. "But I hope you find joy, because you deserve more than I could ever give." Sitting alone in his apartment, Raymond read her words. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel relief. What came instead was a gentle release, a kind of peace he hadn't expected. Melanie's chapter had finally closed, and with that, he could turn the page without regret. As for Melanie, she began building something new, not a replica of what was lost, but a life shaped by resilience and clarity. She started going to therapy. She slowly reopened the lines of communication with her parents. She gave her time to a local shelter, helping women in crisis, pouring herself into something greater than her own pain. The ache of losing Raymond remained, a quiet echo in the background, but she let it drive her toward becoming someone stronger. This wasn't a story about finding the way back. It was about the strength to move forward. Melanie and Raymond, each in their own way, learned what it meant to carry truth, to face the consequences of choice, and to begin again with quiet courage.